The sharp crack of a hand striking flesh echoed through the empty office hallway. A woman in a janitor's uniform staggered back, her cheek flaring a bright, burning red from the impact. The manager, Derek Williams, towered over her, his face a mask of rage and something far darker. "Know your place," he screamed, his voice dripping with a venom that cut deeper than any physical blow. "You need to learn respect. You are nobody here." As if on cue, Supervisor Karen Stevens appeared, holding a bucket of sloshing, dirty mop water. Without a word, she dumped the entire contents over the woman's head. "Maybe this will teach you some manners," Karen sneered, watching the janitor stand frozen, humiliated, and dripping with grime. But Victoria Sterling did not flinch. She did not move. They had no idea who they were dealing with. And in that moment, as the scene seemed to warp around them, chaos erupted for Derek and Karen. The janitor they believed to be nobody was about to reveal exactly who she was. Victoria Sterling, at 35, was one of the wealthiest women in America. By 25, she had built her first tech startup from a cramped studio apartment, surviving on 18-hour days and ramen noodles. When investors refused to meet with her, she bootstrapped her way to success. When competitors tried to steal her ideas, she simply outworked them. And when the media questioned how a young black woman could be the mind behind such innovation, she let her bank account do the talking. One startup became two, then three. By 35, Victoria was worth over $200 million, with a reputation as the woman who could turn any failing company into a gold mine. She didn't just break glass ceilings, she pulverized them. But with great success came a solemn responsibility. Victoria never forgot where she came from, or how people treated her when they thought she had no power. She had just acquired Sterling Solutions, a commercial cleaning company with operations in 15 major office buildings. Her lawyer, David Patterson, slid the final documents across the polished boardroom table. "Congratulations, Victoria. You now own one of the city's largest cleaning services. 15 buildings, over 300 employees, and $50 million in annual revenue." But Victoria's CFO, Amanda Walsh, wore a look of deep concern. "Victoria, I need to be honest. We've been getting reports about serious morale issues, high turnover, complaints about management, and some rather disturbing allegations." "What kind of allegations?" Victoria asked. Her voice was steady, but it held an edge that commanded the room's full attention. Amanda shifted uncomfortably. "Discrimination, hostile work environment. Several employees have quit without notice. The Pinnacle Tower location seems to be a nexus of the problem." Victoria leaned back, her mind already racing. She had built her fortune on understanding people, on seeing what others missed. There was only one way to learn the truth about her new company. "I want to see what's happening for myself before I'm announced as the new owner," she declared, her decision made. "Schedule the introduction for next Friday. That gives me 2 weeks." David looked puzzled. 2 weeks for what exactly? A smile touched Victoria's lips, but it wasn't warm. It was the smile of a woman who had learned to fight fire with fire. 2 weeks to see how my employees are really treated when they think no one important is watching." In her penthouse apartment, Victoria stared at her reflection as she transformed from a millionaire CEO into Vanessa Johnson, a desperate job seeker who needed work badly enough to take anything. Her private investigator had crafted a flawless backstory: single mother, high school education, recently unemployed, facing eviction. She was vulnerable, powerless, exactly the kind of person abusive managers targeted. Off came the $50,000 Rolex and the diamond earrings. The designer suit was replaced with worn thrift store jeans and a faded t-shirt. She pulled her hair into a simple ponytail and scrubbed away her expensive makeup, leaving only the faint traces of drugstore cosmetics. Looking in the mirror, she saw a stranger, not a titan of industry, but a woman who looked like she might not fight back. The transformation was complete, but the mind behind the disguise remained as sharp as ever. The next morning, Vanessa Johnson walked into the Pinnacle Tower, a 40-story monument of gleaming glass and steel. In the HR office, Lisa Martinez conducted the interview, her attention split between Victoria's application and the constant buzz of her phone. "So, custodial work," Lisa said, barely looking up. "I have to be honest, Vanessa, we have a high turnover rate in that department. Management can be demanding." It was a warning wrapped in corporate jargon, and it told Victoria everything she needed to know. "I really need this job," Victoria said, letting a calculated note of desperation enter her voice. I can handle demanding. I just need steady work. Lisa studied her for a moment, an internal debate flashing in her eyes, but business won out. You're hired. Start tomorrow, 6 a.m. sharp. Report to Karen Stevens. She's the supervisor. Leaving the building, Victoria felt a cold mix of anticipation and dread. She was about to enter a world where she would be judged not by her mind, but by the uniform she wore. She had no idea how dark those judgments were about to become. At 6 a.m., Victoria walked through the employee entrance of Pinnacle Tower. Supervisor Karen Stevens was waiting, her arms crossed and her eyes filled with suspicion. Karen was a middle-aged woman whose permanent scowl suggested she'd never met a person of color she trusted. Let me guess, Karen said, her voice dripping with disdain as she looked Victoria up and down. Another one looking for easy money. Before Victoria could respond, manager Derek Williams emerged from his office like a storm cloud. He was a tall, heavy-set man with small, cruel eyes that seemed to calculate just how much pain he could inflict before a person broke. We run a tight ship here, Derek announced, his voice booming with unearned authority. No special treatment for your kind. You work hard, you keep your mouth shut, and maybe you'll last longer than the others. Your kind. Two words that hit Victoria like a physical blow. In boardrooms, her name commanded silence. Here, she was a stereotype before she'd even cleaned a single surface. The difference in how Derek and Karen treated the staff was a masterclass in discrimination. Jennifer, a young white college graduate, was praised and given light duties. At least some people here have a work ethic, Derek would say, patting her shoulder. But to Victoria and the other minority workers, his demeanor was monstrous. Maria, a Latina mother of 3, and Robert, a black veteran, endured the same quiet humiliation, their eyes reflecting a weary defeat. People like you need to prove you belong here, Derek whispered to Victoria, his voice a low threat. I've seen too many of your type come and go, thinking they deserve something for nothing. Victoria's hands clenched into fists, but she forced herself to remain Vanessa Johnson, a desperate woman who needed this job. She nodded, accepting his words, but behind her eyes, the fire of justice was burning hotter than ever. As the days passed, the abuse became a systematic campaign of racial harassment. Karen assigned Victoria the most demeaning tasks, scrubbing filthy kitchens and toilets while Jennifer organized supply closets. This is more your speed, Karen would sneer. You're naturally suited for this kind of work. Derek's comments were a daily torture. Your people are used to this, he'd say loudly whenever she struggled. It's in your DNA. The harassment went beyond words. Victoria's locker was searched daily for security reasons, a public shaming ritual while others' belongings remained untouched. She watched her colleagues look away, Maria in shame, Robert with a clenched jaw, even Jennifer in silent discomfort. They were all trapped, too afraid of losing their jobs to speak out. By the end of the first week, the abuse escalated. Victoria arrived at work exactly on time, but Derek was waiting. Typical, he screamed before she could even clock in. No respect for time. Exactly what I expected. When she tried to explain, Karen shoved her hard against a wall. Maybe this will teach you some discipline, she snarled, her breath hot on Victoria's face. They locked her in a supply closet. For 1 hour, Victoria sat in the suffocating darkness, surrounded by the chemical stench of cleaners, listening to Derek's voice through the door. She's probably used to small spaces, he laughed to the others. Living like animals. When they finally let her out, Derek wasn't finished. He planted office supplies in her bag and then discovered them during a search. A thief, he announced triumphantly, just like I suspected. The second week brought a violence Victoria had never imagined possible. While mopping near Derek's office, she accidentally spilled a small amount of water. Clumsy, he exploded, storming out. Can't even mop a floor without making a mess. Before she could apologize, his hand swung through the air. The crack of the slap echoed down the hall. Victoria's head snapped to the side, the taste of blood sharp in her mouth. For a moment, the $200 million CEO stood in stunned silence. Then Karen appeared with the bucket of filthy mop water. Cool off, she sneered, dumping it over Victoria's head. The disgusting water soaked her uniform, dripping onto the floor as Derek continued his tirade. He threatened to call security, claiming she was dangerous. Later, Jennifer whispered a tearful apology. I'm so sorry, but if I speak up, they'll fire me. I have student loans. Robert, the veteran, pulled her aside, his face etched with pain. This is what they do, he said quietly. The uniforms change, but the hate is always the same. Standing there, soaked in filth and surrounded by the silence of fear, Victoria knew she had uncovered a systemic culture of racial violence. Derek and Karen had made one crucial mistake. They had no idea who they were about to reckon with. But she was wrong about hitting rock bottom. What she discovered next revealed their hatred was fueled by something even more dangerous: a desperate need to hide their own crimes. Cleaning the supply room late one evening, Victoria saw Derek and Karen loading boxes of expensive equipment and brand new computer supplies into Derek's car. She hid, her blood running cold as she watched them systematically steal thousands of dollars worth of company property. They were criminals, robbing the company blind. "That's another $2,000, Karen whispered, loading laptops into the trunk. "The new owner will never notice if we move fast." Derek laughed. "By the time anyone figures it out, we'll be long gone." Victoria had stumbled upon a massive theft operation. Her hiding spot, however, wasn't as secure as she'd thought. "What was that?" Karen's head snapped toward the supply room, her eyes narrowing in the darkness. Derek's eyes narrowed, his gaze fixed on a flicker of movement behind a stack of cardboard boxes. "Someone's there." When they dragged Victoria into the light, the panic that flared in their eyes was immediate and terrifying. "You didn't see anything," Derek hissed, his voice a low, menacing current in the stale air of the supply room. "You understand me? Nothing." But Victoria's expression must have betrayed her, because a wave of fear washed over Karen's face, leaving it pale and taut. "She's going to report us," Karen whispered, her voice trembling. "We're finished." It was then that Derek's voice shifted, shedding its crude anger for a cold, sharp calculation that made Victoria's skin crawl. "We need to get rid of her," he said, his mind already churning, assembling a solution. "She's becoming a problem, thinks she has rights, and now she knows too much." Karen's response was even more chilling. "What do you suggest? We can't let her destroy everything we've built here." Derek's plan was so depraved, so clinically evil, that Victoria had to grip a nearby metal shelf to keep her knees from buckling. "Call the cops," he said, as if ordering a pizza. "Say she threatened us. Make it sound dangerous, like we're afraid for our lives." "Perfect," Karen breathed, a sick enthusiasm blooming in her voice that made Victoria's stomach clench. "Those people always have a record. The police will believe us over her." Derek's laugh was a dry, rasping sound, devoid of humor and full of malice. "She probably has warrants. Drugs, maybe theft. They'll haul her away and we'll never see her again. Problem solved." In that moment, Victoria understood. Derek and Karen weren't just racist bullies, they were criminals, willing to manipulate the law to destroy a life. They saw the justice system not as a shield, but as a weapon, one they knew would be aimed at her, a black janitor, on the word of two white managers caught in the act of stealing. Standing there, surrounded by the evidence of their crimes and the echo of their hateful plotting, Victoria made a decision. She pulled out her phone, the one device connecting Vanessa Johnson, the janitor, to Victoria Sterling, the billionaire, and placed a call Derek and Karen could never have anticipated. "Amanda," she said quietly to her executive assistant, "move the introduction meeting to tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Make sure everyone is there." "Tomorrow?" Amanda's voice was laced with surprise. "But Victoria, that doesn't give us time to—" "Trust me," Victoria interrupted, her tone leaving no room for argument. "After what I've just discovered, waiting is not an option. These people need to meet their new owner, immediately. And Amanda, call building security. I want this supply room secured tonight. We have thieves on the premises." As she hung up, a grim certainty settled over her. Derek and Karen's theft operation had sealed their own fate. They had shown her exactly who they were. Criminals who would sacrifice an innocent person to protect their grubby enterprise. They had no idea their victim was about to become their judge. The next morning, Derek and Karen executed their plan with the chilling precision of seasoned performers. Victoria watched as they prepared their stage, applying the same attention to detail she herself once reserved for billion-dollar negotiations. Derek positioned himself near the supply closet, just outside the security camera's line of sight. He mussed his own hair, theatrically knocked over a stack of boxes, and even dragged his fingernails down his own forearm, creating the illusion of a struggle. Then the performance began. "Help!" he bellowed, his voice echoing through the pristine lobby. "She attacked me! Somebody call security!" Victoria stood frozen as Derek pointed a trembling finger at her, his face a mask of convincing, fabricated terror. Employees began to gather, their faces a mixture of confusion and alarm. Without missing a beat, Karen pulled out her phone and dialed 911, her voice perfectly calibrated to sound frantic and terrified. "We have an aggressive black female threatening staff," she cried into the phone, weaponizing Victoria's race in a way that sent a blade of ice through her veins. "She attacked our manager. We need police here immediately. We're scared for our lives." The lies flowed from her like a well-rehearsed script, painting Victoria as a violent menace who had suddenly snapped. Within minutes, 2 police officers arrived. Officer Martinez was a weary, middle-aged man whose suspicious eyes had clearly seen too much. His partner, Officer Davis, was younger, but carried himself with the cocky assurance of someone who had already passed judgment. The moment their eyes fell on Victoria, a black woman in a janitor's uniform surrounded by anxious, well-dressed managers, their professional assumptions hardened into action. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," Officer Martinez announced, his hand already on his handcuffs. The world seemed to spin. 2 weeks ago, she had been signing contracts that shaped skylines. Now she was being treated like a criminal. "For what?" Victoria asked, her voice miraculously steady. "I haven't done anything." Derek stepped forward, delivering his Oscar-worthy final lines. "She's been hostile all day, officers. We feel unsafe. She threatened me." The officers glanced from Derek's scratched arm and disheveled appearance to Victoria. In their minds, the case was closed. "Turn around, hands behind your back," Officer Davis commanded. Victoria felt the cold, impersonal bite of steel as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on her as every employee in the building stared. Derek and Karen had won. Karen couldn't resist a final, triumphant jab. "Finally," she announced with a gleam in her eye, "someone's taking out the trash." But just as the officers began to lead her away, the glass doors of the lobby slid open. A man in a flawlessly tailored suit strode in with the quiet confidence of someone who owned the very air he breathed. It was David Patterson, her attorney. "Officers," David said, his voice calm but resonant, commanding immediate attention. "I'll need to speak with you regarding this arrest." Martinez looked irritated. "Sir, this is police business. Step back." David offered a thin smile that likely cost $500 an hour. "I'm afraid this is very much my business. You are about to arrest my client on what I am certain are entirely fraudulent charges." Over the next 20 minutes, David systematically dismantled their story. He noted the convenient lack of security footage. He highlighted the inconsistencies in their statements. He questioned why a supposedly dangerous woman would submit to arrest so calmly, and most importantly, he demanded they review the building's security feed from the hallway leading to the supply closet. When the footage played on a security monitor showing Derek calmly staging his own assault, the officer's demeanor shifted from dismissive to alarmed. The handcuffs were removed from Victoria's wrists. Derek and Karen were sternly informed that filing a false police report was a felony. The charges were dropped, but the damage was done. She had been publicly humiliated, treated like a criminal because 2 racists couldn't stand her presence. Standing there watching the color drain from their faces as their plan imploded, Victoria felt a cold, hard satisfaction settle deep in her bones. Tomorrow morning, they were going to meet their new boss. And their new boss knew exactly what kind of people they were. The next morning, Derek and Karen walked into work radiating an aura of invincibility. At 8:45 a.m., an announcement crackled over the intercom. "All employees, please report to the main conference room for an important company meeting." Derek straightened his tie, his chest puffed out with pride. "New owners coming," he announced to the staff. "I hope they appreciate managers who know how to maintain order." Karen nodded smugly. "Probably some rich type who doesn't understand the streets," she said with a dismissive wave. "No idea what it really takes." Derek's grin turned conspiratorial. "At least we cleaned house yesterday," he whispered loudly enough for several people to hear. "Got rid of the troublemaker. The new owner will thank us." A few employees shifted uncomfortably. Maria Gonzalez stared at the floor. Robert Jackson's jaw was clenched tight. Just then, the conference room doors swung open. Everyone turned, expectant. Derek and Karen positioned themselves at the front, ready to make their sterling first impression. But the person who stepped through the doors was not a stranger. It was Victoria. Gone was the janitor's uniform. In its place was a tailored power suit that cost more than Derek's monthly salary. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She moved with the unmistakable, quiet authority of someone who owned everything she surveyed. Derek's brain stalled. "Security!" he stammered, his voice cracking. "The janitor is in the wrong room." Victoria's smile was as cold and sharp as ice. "Hello, Derek," she said, her voice now imbued with absolute power. "Hello, Karen." The room fell deathly silent. David Patterson entered behind her carrying a briefcase. "Everyone," David announced, his voice cutting through the stunned silence, "allow me to introduce Victoria Sterling, the new owner of Sterling Solutions, and of this building." The silence that followed was absolute. The color drained from Derek's face, leaving it a sickly, terrified white. Karen's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "That's impossible," Karen finally managed. "She's just a—" Victoria's eyes locked onto hers. "A what, Karen?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Go on, say what you really think I am." "This has to be some kind of mistake," Derek pleaded, his hands trembling. "You can't be—" Victoria's smile was unwavering. "The only mistake," she said, each word a perfectly placed blow, "was trusting you to run my company." Derek's survival instincts took over. He began to grovel. "Ms. Sterling, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. If I had known who you were—" "There was no misunderstanding, Derek," Victoria cut him off, her voice like frozen steel. "You poured filthy water on my head because you thought I was beneath you. You had me arrested on false charges because you're a coward who couldn't stand the thought of a black woman in your space." "I was just maintaining order," he protested weakly. "You were maintaining white supremacy," she corrected. "You use the police as your personal weapon against people who look like me." "We didn't know who you were," Karen cried, as if that was a defense. Victoria laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Exactly. You treated me like garbage because you thought you could get away with it. You tried to destroy my life because you assumed I was powerless." "This is reverse discrimination," Derek shouted, his face flushing red again. "You can't punish us for doing our jobs." "No, Derek," Victoria replied, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than his shout. "This is justice." The words hung in the air, a final judgment. They had built their world on the bedrock of their own bigotry, secure in the belief that their victims would always be silent, but they had chosen the wrong victim. "Derek Williams, Karen Stevens," Victoria announced, her voice ringing with finality. "You are terminated, effective immediately." "You can't do this," Derek roared. "I'll sue." "Good luck," Victoria said calmly. "I have video of you assaulting me. I have documentation of you stealing over $50,000 worth of company property. And the FBI has been notified about your little theft ring. They're very interested in your tax records." On cue, the conference room doors opened again. This time it wasn't building security. It was police detectives and 2 FBI agents. "Derek Williams and Karen Stevens," a detective said, holding up a pair of handcuffs. "You're under arrest." As the cold metal clicked around his wrists, Derek's face twisted in a final paroxysm of hate. "This is a setup. She's getting revenge." "I was testing you," Victoria corrected him, her gaze unflinching. "I wanted to see how you would treat a black employee when you thought no one important was watching. You showed me exactly who you are. The setup was your own racism." As they were being led away, Karen screamed over her shoulder, "This isn't over! People like you will never belong here. You'll always be nothing but a—" Victoria held up a hand, silencing her. "Karen," she said, her voice soft but clear, "I own this building. I own 15 others. I am worth over $200 million. And you are going to federal prison." The door closed behind them, leaving a profound silence. Victoria turned to the remaining employees, her expression softening slightly. "Let me be clear," she said, her voice resonating with both authority and compassion. "Racism, in any form, will not be tolerated at this company. Everyone who works here deserves to be treated with dignity." Her gaze fell on Maria Gonzalez, the woman who had tried to help her, even at her own risk. "Maria," Victoria said, "you're promoted to building supervisor, effective immediately." "Your courage and your compassion," Victoria began, her voice steady and clear, are precisely what make you the kind of leader this company needs. She then named a salary, $75,000 a year, with full benefits and company stock. For Maria, it wasn't just a number. It was the end of an era, an end to the crushing weight of poverty, to the impossible choices between paying rent and buying groceries for her 3 children. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of a profound, overwhelming relief. The struggle was finally over. Next, she turned to Robert Jackson, the veteran who had weathered his own storm of harassment in silence. "Robert," she said, "you are promoted to assistant manager. Your experience and integrity are the cornerstones on which we will build a workplace where everyone can thrive." She announced his salary, $85,000, along with veteran benefits and a signing bonus designed to erase the financial scars of his past struggles. For the first time in months, Robert straightened his shoulders. The deep-set shadow of defeat in his eyes receded, replaced by the unmistakable light of renewed hope and restored dignity. Victoria then addressed the entire room, and her next words sent a ripple of shock through the assembled staff. "Effective immediately," she declared, "every employee in this building will receive a 40% pay raise." A stunned silence was broken by murmurs of disbelief. She wasn't finished. "You will all have full health benefits, including dental and vision. Paid vacation, sick leave, and family leave are now standard." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Furthermore, we are implementing a profit-sharing program. When this company succeeds, you all succeed." But the most important changes were yet to come. Her gaze found Jennifer Wilson, the young woman who had witnessed the abuse, trapped by fear into silence. "Jennifer," Victoria said gently, "you are appointed as our new Director of Human Resources. Your job will be to build an unshakable foundation of anti-discrimination policies, to ensure that what happened to me can never happen to anyone else here." She added, "We will also be funding your MBA so you can become the best in this industry." Jennifer accepted, tears streaming down her face, vowing to herself and to Victoria that she would never again be a bystander to injustice. Victoria's voice deepened with conviction as she laid out the new philosophy of the company. "Dignity at work is not a privilege, it is a fundamental right," she proclaimed, "regardless of race, gender, religion, or background. We are implementing mandatory diversity training, anonymous reporting systems, and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind." She outlined a comprehensive overhaul, a worker advocacy committee with real authority, external auditors to ensure fairness, and a robust whistleblower protection program. "No one," she stressed, "will ever have to suffer in silence again." Then came an announcement that stunned everyone into silence. "We are establishing a fund to help any employee mistreated under the previous management. If Derek or Karen cost you opportunities or caused you hardship, we will make it right." In that moment, as employees exchanged looks of incredulous hope, it was clear this wasn't just a change in leadership, it was a revolution. 6 months later, the transformation was nothing short of a miracle. The building that had once been a crucible of fear and hate had become a model workplace, studied and emulated by other companies. Employee satisfaction scores were the highest in the company's history. Productivity had surged by 60%, while turnover had dropped to nearly zero. Most importantly, there had been zero discrimination complaints, and anonymous feedback overflowed with praise for the new culture of respect. Victoria often worked alongside her employees, not as a disguise but as a leader who served. She was a constant reminder that true power lies in lifting others up. She could be found helping with difficult tasks, listening to concerns, and ensuring the promise of dignity was kept every single day. The financial results spoke for themselves. Cleaning contracts had increased by 40% as word of their quality and culture spread. Meanwhile, justice had run its course for Derek and Karen. Convicted of theft and fraud, they were sentenced to 5 years in federal prison, with additional time for the assault. Their mugshots went viral, becoming potent symbols of workplace racism and its consequences. Standing in the very hallway where she had been slapped and doused with dirty water, Victoria reflected. "I went undercover to find the truth about my new company," she mused. "The truth was uglier than I could have imagined. But sometimes, you have to experience injustice firsthand to truly understand how to dismantle it." Her story had been covered by national media, inspiring business owners to examine their own cultures. She had testified before Congress and spoken at universities across the country. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when Maria Gonzalez approached her, her eyes shining. "Ms. Sterling," Maria said, her voice thick with emotion, "my daughter was just accepted to college. For the first time in her life, I can afford to send her. You didn't just change our jobs, you changed our entire futures." Looking out at the thriving, diverse team that now worked together with mutual respect, Victoria knew her mother would have been proud. She had not only built an empire, but had used her power to forge a sanctuary. The woman once humiliated in a janitor's uniform had transformed that pain into a force for justice. She had learned that the most powerful revenge was ensuring that no one else would have to suffer the same injustice. And sometimes, justice looks exactly like a black woman in an expensive suit, standing in a place where she was finally given the respect she had always deserved, while making certain that everyone around her received the same. The story of Victoria Sterling was proof that when one person with power chooses to fight for what is right, the ripples can change countless lives forever.